exactly where it did come from, and we have the supporting information, so I can coordinate with Dan because I had our area as well pull that information as relates to the weather normalized data, and we can just cite that appropriately for the report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can we get a copy of that there? Because that will be important for us.
I'll share it, and I'll work with Chairman Kane as well as Dan, and then we'll send it out to the full group because I had asked for our group to pull that for us as well. So I'll share it with them, and then we can just send it out to the full group, probably coming from Chairman Kane as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And we can get you that if you want. We get it every month. And it's public. It's not public by which supplier, but the total that's delivered is public every month. The PEPCO and the annual is public in our yes.
Okay, excellent. So then I think the question then is, you know, initially I emphasized that because it was in response to the balance issue, but another approach to the balance issue is to say city paper says X, another journal says Y. So I guess the question for the board is, do we do it that way? Do we do it this way? And then just a question on the 2.1%. If you could scroll down further, and this is just to make sure, and while we have people here, and by the way, the sentence, therefore the board finds it is unable to state with certainty whether the SU's performance was adequate. The certainty edits and all that had come from a board meeting, but if that's in conflict with people saying we want to say overall positive right direction and the sentence is too harsh, I'm going to voluntarily suggest that that be struck.
Yeah, well, I would recommend a change there because I don't know what is supporting the fact that we're saying that its performance was not adequate. How does one define adequate? Because based on the benchmarks and based on the EM&D and meeting their some maximum as well as some minimum targets. So I guess some discussion around what we mean by being adequate. I just have some concerns with that statement.
Yeah, understood. So I think that was why I was recommending that we focus on saying overall there has been an exceedance of the minimum benchmarks and hitting the maximum except in all but one case, and that it just speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And not characterizing.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable getting into too much about what the various newspapers said because they don't have the information. I think what that illustrates is we probably need to do a better job getting the story out. But
right,
too much of they said, this paper said, that paper said.
But just before you came into the room, just to let what we were raising and let the record reflect that ex officio member Tommy Wells has entered the room as well. That there's been back and forth on the reference to the city paper, but there were comments by the People's Council and others that we don't want to strike it entirely because we don't want to suggest that the board isn't aware and paying attention. And I was suggesting that stating that the city paper has made criticism, but not quoting it, because there's a sentence there that I think would be regarded as inflammatory. So we just state as a fact the city paper has been critical. Before you came in, then there was a suggestion, would it make sense to balance that by saying others have provided praise and positive commentary?
Well, I think you say city paper, you got to say loose lips. I mean,
yeah.
You know, it's so that you give it the credit that it's due. It's you know, it's loose lips.
Okay, so that's
a reporter.
Okay,
at the city
a reporter at this.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, all right, that's good.
I mean, treat it with the deference it's due, which is loose lips.
Right. I'm just saying before. So there was a sentiment expressed in comments since the meeting that we had that we wanted to document that it had happened, and then this morning, before you both came in, was where there was a statement that document it, but document other third parties commending performance as well. But I think Chairman King was saying you don't like that approach.
I think the conclusion you draw from that mixed result is some papers, you know, is that we probably need to somebody needs to better getting the story out, getting the facts straight.
Right.
And getting the facts out. And so it's
But that's
it's
how we
always a
set it up,
challenge.
which is just that it's
Loose
on
lips
us.
is not a factual column.
Right.
It's
true.
intended to embarrass public officials.
Yes.
It's written that way.
Yes.
And I talked to the guy, and he wanted to embarrass Ted Tribune. It's written that way. Ted, you're a public person. And so that's, what happens. But it was clear, that's what Loose Lips does. They're stocking charges to either make fun of the mayor, undermine, or not undermine, but make fun of the city administrator. In terms of, how much credibility that has, it's not held to the same standard as an article.
So, okay, I'm trying to balance what I've heard from lots of the members in terms of acknowledging its existence. Are you suggesting that that's...
The board has to determine the seriousness with which you handle any information. I, as the director of the agency, when I went back to look at things like $4,000 for lunch and found out that it was for a training session for the People's Council, I realized that it was written in a way to be inflammatory and not reflective. And I'm sure the People's Council appreciated that $4,000 lunch at a very good price per head. And so I don't think that just as the director, I did not look at this as information to be helpful in our oversight and administering the contract.
Okay, I guess so. I leave to you all what we want to do.
And let me just share, I know that the Office of the People's Council made a recommendation to somehow include this still yet as a reference point of awareness, and that's where Ted shared that, in my viewpoint, is the same. If there is a decision to let this information stand, that there should be a balance on more favorable statements, but that is if a statement should stand. So I want to defer to Ms. Fitzstrong just to share again why you think that it definitely should remain, and more importantly, are there other ways to potentially maybe footnote it or include it as opposed to it being so dominant in the report?
I guess the question I have, quite frankly, I'm kind of just hearing about this, but my question would be, do you need to have anything in there? I'm hearing that there are also reports from the media that are very positive. So, do we need to have anything in the report? If we do, then it should be, as Ted said, balanced. Include it all, include the positive. But my question is, really, okay, do you need to have reference to any media?
I was fine with actually removing it altogether, but I defer, obviously, it's the full board to decide this. But if we included it, I would be supportive of balance as well. Mm-hmm. But so I'm not supportive of allowing it to stand, but I defer to others as well.
I guess the question is, how much credibility we put in it. This is our report to the council. The fact that there was some bad publicity, misinformed publicity, I would say, probably malicious.
Yeah.
If we had a section in here that said how the SCU was perceived, that might be relevant. But I was uncomfortable with giving any credit, because I think a lot of the information that's been in the press is probably about the SCU is either not factual or not the whole picture. And so, if we believe it, if we think that everything that the city paper said was right, that it was a terrible expose,
yeah,
put it in. But
I think that the point wasn't to let the city paper guide what the board is doing. Yeah. I think that what I had heard was an effort for the board's credibility. It's not like the credibility of the city paper. Is the board listening to what it hears, and is the board doing its oversight job, and the board making an independent judgment as to whether or not it's going to toss what the city paper said or be guided by it. And I think that the goal here was to say, we're aware of it, but we're doing our own work and we're looking at benchmarks independently and saying you've exceeded minimum all across the board and maximum all but one, and we want to know what's going on with the one, and that's what we're drilling down on. I think that was the point, but it was more a credibility of the board, like we're paying attention, we hear, and then we assimilate and decide what to do with that information.
The reason like the board's aware that there have been some negative stories in the press, however, our judgment is X, Y, Z.
Right. So, okay.
Or upon review, the board is satisfied with, if you are, with the performance of SEU.
Or that if the minimum standards have been met in maximum in most cases.
Yeah, because I think that
It's our judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that's
What they're
important,
saying.
Our names are on this report.
That's right.
I would support any reference to after hearing this, everything each one have said, to a new striking. I don't see anything to mention. However, we should be ready with a clear statement if we are later asked or a council member, we could testify and then we would be ready to respond to that question. That's mine.
Yeah, I second that. I think that's the best way to handle it.
Okay, so I think that sounds like let's vote, and it sounds like we are moving towards striking references to third parties, and we're going to talk about our own assessment of the benchmarks and whether they're met or exceeded. And I think we could say something like the board is aware of third-party discussion. However, the board is framing this in terms of its assessment of the benchmarks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that would address People's Council's concern.
Okay, great. All right.
Your luncheon.
So, so I'm going to move to have a statement. The board is aware of third-party commentary, positive and negative. The board is focusing on the benchmarks and overall finds that the minimum benchmarks have been met or exceeded. The maximum all but one. The board is drilling down on the reasons, or what may be the reasons, and as we say, internal and external factors could be holding back the achievement of the other hitting the other maximum benchmark. How about a second? Second. All right, good. Okay. I think Sean is not here, but I think in the latter half, if you don't mind, sorry, because I don't have a hard copy of the whole thing, just scrolling. I think there was only one question left in the margins. That's all gone, so we don't have to worry about that. That's gone. Gone. It was in the second half. In the second half, I think that the big question, or a question, had been Sean Scully's section on low income, which he rewrote. And so if you're able to locate that, please. Oh, okay, this was some new stuff from the, I'll just call your attention to it. Right, so if you could just look at that for a moment. These pieces were concerning EM&V. It came out of the last board meeting, and is Lenny on the phone? No, and so, and some suggestions from Lenny, so people should look at those and see if they agree or disagree.
Well, I could put on some of the items here that probably need to be addressed. The first one being using the ACEEE. As I mentioned before, ACEEE does not produce standards for EM&V. Not to my knowledge at all, it's not what the industry uses. And secondly,
can I ask, please? The board's recommendation is to look at alternative methods. So, I asked for assistance on such as what is an alternative method, and I think it was Lenny or somebody suggested ACEEE. If ACEEE is not a good model, can we point to another one? Or
We can point to, but this method that is referenced here in terms of doing a real-time evaluation to be able to present immediate feedback, it is something that Tetra Tech did in FY16 for the DCSU, and it's captured in the report that was produced. So recommending that we move to doing a more real-time evaluation is something that's already been done.
okay, so let's go back to the sentence. The metrics that used, I think that there was a consensus that the EM&V report could be, the metrics could be more meaningful. And that was why the board has requested an opportunity to participate. And we'll talk about that in a moment, or at some point today, in the discussions after your kickoff meeting. So we can either just end it there and say the board is dissatisfied with the metrics and wants to see if there are other ones, period. Or we could say because there are other models such as. If we're not prepared today to say because there are other models such as, then I recommend we just drop it and just say we intend to have a discussion in the future about alternative metrics that the EM&V might employ, because we have to get it done and we don't have any today.
Okay. Even
I
this,
would
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry.
This section here, where it's recommended that DOE should or could require BIC contract under our supervision. BIC does not control the contract. It is controlled by the districts. So the district which would not control.
Okay, like I'm saying, let's just drop a period after the metrics that presently used are understand.
Presently used are none too illuminating. Then we've got
Realization
realization
rates
rates
and
and acquisition costs. Are those the metrics that we're saying not illuminating?
Yes, period, and drop the rest.
Well, maybe the last sentence is okay. The goal of evaluation should be determined whether the program is meeting its, I guess not its goals, is meeting its goals, not whether it's performing.
Right, should be not meeting its goals. Yeah. Okay, we'll leave the last sentence, third bullet. If there's any chance that I can scribble, but it doesn't. What page is that on, please? Page 13. Okay.
What does it mean that the time for input is now?
That the EM&V contract was renewed or awarded, and after DOE awards the contract and has its kickoff meeting, then there'll be a discussion of the scope of work of what the EM&V contract will look like, what the performance will look like in the year coming up. So that was why we were saying, like, we want to participate in the scope of work so that we can see if we can get the EM&V to be more meaningful than we thought it was in prior years.
What we can share is the RFP, because as far as the scope of work is concerned in the contract, the RFP forms the basis of what the contract ultimately becomes. The scope is already specified in the RFP. So if there's anything there that the board would like to add to that process, we would need to do so before we execute the contract and then have to put contract amendment.
So I think that's not what we heard months ago. We heard the time for us would be after the kickoff meeting and the contract is awarded when the scope of work is.
Yes, I'm just saying review the RFP to see what's in there right now, to see if there's anything else that you think needs to be captured from the M&V standpoint.
Can we get that, please?
Yes, we can send you a copy of it.
Okay, thank you. And then do people want to get rid of the last bullet, or that was for the audit?
This last bullet is going to be pointing to the financial audit.
Yes.
For us to develop terms of reference.
Yes.
So we were wondering if the board can provide some input on what those terms of reference should be for a financial audit, because again, the auditor will follow either GAAP principles or some other established accounting principles to do a financial audit. So I'm just curious on the terms of reference.
we're recommending DOE work with the SCU, right? Or work with this time BEIT.
I think there were some board members who were commenting similarly to the EM&V report that the audit report was focusing on. Did the expenditure happen that was proposed to be expended? And it may not have been the sort of more holistic approach towards saying, is the audit being, are the expenditures correct? Or are the expenditures where we would see them go?
Audit, that's exactly what a financial audit does. A financial audit says, I know.
Not my comments.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
there are other kinds of audits. There's program audits and performance audits, but a financial audit says, the budget says you were going to spend X on this. Did you? If it was a change, was there a trail that showed that it was put in the right account, that the money was financial? Different than a program audit.
Well, do people who have looked at the audit carefully feel that there is improvement that could be made to the audit? We don't have Lenny on the phone when he feels strongly about it.
You were referring to, that's why I asked, because you're talking about two different audits. It says for such audits in programmatic faucet and financial sustainability in there. Those are two audits. So if we're getting, maybe we're saying we want a program. Or how is that different than an evaluation? I understand, we had some meetings and we said we didn't understand the audit, what the numbers meant, that kind of thing.
Well, the only thing I can recommend is either we, ask board members who were most concerned about this to help us come up with better recommendations, or agree that it's going to be on the board's head to come up with the recommended terms of reference and leave the bullet in.
If I may contribute, as you'll see when you review the RFP for the evaluation, measurement, and verification contract, because of the longer time, the scope there content in the RFP requests not just evaluations of the performance metrics, but also process evaluations. And in the evaluation industry, process evaluation looks at obviously the processes by which something's being done, how the program's being run, and is it serving the needs and working in the best ways.
Okay, so
which I don't know quite what's meant by programmatic audit, but it sounds to me like that need might be served by the process evaluation aspect of the EM&V contract.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Let me just back up 1 second before we move off of this piece, which is, so just now I've asked for the RFP for the EM&V. In 2 meetings ago, or the last meeting, or maybe it's this meeting that we still have the outstanding minutes on, you said the board needs to say crisply what it wants. The board is saying crisply, please. Please provide the RFP for EM&V. Since the last meeting, when the board crisply asked for information on green jobs so that Nicole Steele could do her part of this report, we did not get the green jobs information. And I think there was a question whether or not the board was supposed to follow up with a written request for what it crisply states it wants.
You're saying the green jobs performance part of the, I think there's 2 pieces. One is there's a clear performance measure in green jobs, not of green jobs, but of jobs of local folks that the SU has to provide. But there's some, let me think this through, but there's some discussion of, do they get credit when people move on and get jobs elsewhere? And can they or should they track that? It's not in their contract to track that. On one hand, SU would like to get credit for the green jobs that continue on from their workers. On the other hand, it's not a performance measure. So the question is, was the expectation that they would do a survey of their former employees to see if where they're employed, or is it related to a performance metric that they already gather? That's the question.
And if I may, Mr. Director, let me add a third element to the request from Ms. Steele, which was, what were the types of jobs that were created in the metric itself. And I think she asked for a breakdown of the types of jobs.
Of which the metric that you currently keep?
Yes.
Of the folks
Right.
that you currently employ?
Right, because what we do
Okay.
is, what we report to you is basically a summation of hours, total hours worked, that add up to a certain number of FTEs. Under that, there are different sorts of jobs that are worked. I think that that's what Ms. Steele was trying to ascertain through the request of the last advisory board meeting of what different types of jobs were created as well.
So were you able to provide that?
We have that, and I'm gonna look at members of the staff back here.
When we send over a job report, we have advised our staff. We have the job description.
So I don't know if that's responsive necessarily to the question that Ted just asked. That because it doesn't, I don't think it has to go through us to go to the board. So if the board made a request on the types of jobs, then it would primarily just be the job descriptions of people that are there, right?
Right. And so if
I don't know, we don't have job description.
job titles, I mean, if that's about the best that we have right now, we can provide that information to the board. I know you are on a deadline to try to submit this report. Do you think it's fair that we could get that by Wednesday?
Or this is for 16?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd be good to know if that is specifically what Nicole was asking.
Is anybody able to locate the piece of the minutes where the requests are recorded? I know I saw them, and when I sent them back to you guys, I said, has this come yet? If no one has it at their fingertips, does anybody recall seeing it and looking at it and saying, what is it she's asking for? It doesn't look like it. Questions now. I don't see it at all in the piece.
It's the bullets on page 4.
Mm-hmm.
Bullet number 7.
Okay.
Second sentence.
The number of jobs created across specific program areas.
Yeah, I thought she wanted what they have the data for, which is the FTE count per contractor. And the title should give you some indication of what they did.
Number of jobs, would you say?
The hours worked, in terms of full-time equivalent, because everything is counted based on full-time equivalent hours.
So the FTEs, because it's the 200,000 equals one
And
free job.
1950 hours equals one.
Sorry?
1950.
I think
1950.
Madam Chair, I think what Councilor here is saying is correct. What Ms. Steele asked for was a breakdown of the 1,950 hours equal to one FTE, and how that was divided up between programs, or and I have directed it, but we'll have job titles of different people who served that added up to those to the hours that were accrued to actually come up with the FTE.
Okay, thank you. So we will be able to get that.
We pull it together.
Okay. Thank you, because this is for this. So just from a process perspective, if the board asks for something crisply in a board meeting, is that adequate, or is the board supposed to do follow-up in writing as well?
Well, I think this is what gets confusing. The confusion is when just someone says, hey, what about such and such? And trying to determine whether that was a board request or a member's request. And sometimes it may mean further conversation with that member versus, is this a request for the whole board? Is the whole board interested in this? And that's kind of what, it doesn't have to be written. It just needs to be clearly said, the board wants this information. But members often ask for things. I know Lenny often asks for different kinds of information. It'd be very difficult to keep up with that if that's a board request or if that's something to follow up with her on. So on this, sounds like our general counsel seemed to understand exactly what you're looking for. You should have been provided that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we had a lot of discussion about it, which is why I think that the board was saying in order to move forward with the annual report, the board needs this information because this is a section of the annual report. And I would ask if the request isn't clear in the meeting, because that's where we're encapsulating it, and that's the point of seeing the minutes, because if you don't see the minutes until a couple days before the meeting, you say, oh yeah, we were waiting for stuff that never came in, we're not going to remember to follow up in writing. So if it's not understood in the...
Right. And we had this discussion during our regular weekly meetings.
Okay, great. No, I'm just saying, ask us if you're not hearing, is this from Lenny or is this from the whole board? Ask us in the meeting.
No, we were working on preparing it, and as we said, you should have that very, very.
Okay, yeah.
We apologize about the fact that it wasn't here on the time that this is for today's.
Okay, thanks. Well, it was for her to write up for the report that we were discussing. Thank you. Okay, if you could scroll further down, please, then. I think the last remaining question in the report was in the area that Sean Scully wrote, revised. And I think there was still a question outstanding. That it was a marginal comment from Chairman Kane.
Do you know what page your comment is?
I'm looking for it. Hang on a second, please. Page 35. Oh no. Sorry. Ah, I made it up. Okay. Oh, no. There it is. Page 16. Is that page 16, KBA? Yeah. I think that's it, right where you were. So I believe, and I apologize, this should all have been redlined, the Sean Scully inclusion, but the recommendations didn't change. So I think the question is whether the board is still comfortable with the recommendations, and there had been the outstanding question from Chairman Kane, and I think a comment from the People's Council. I wanted to make sure those were addressed or ask the people take a look.
Yeah, my question was, so we're recommending maximizing low-income participation by removing renewables and commercial projects from the spending benchmark and remaining in line with the Clean Affordable Energy Act. My point was that renewables and commercial projects are in line. So the question is, are we asking the law to be changed or just to not emphasize those other two parts that are allowable by the law? But it was the remaining in line with the CAEE that was the question, what we meant by that. Because the law was specifically changed to allow the shelters and the clinics and the Rinda's solar, et cetera, to count. And that was a deliberate legislative policy decision.
Right. No, I
And
understand.
I don't know that we went down there and testified against that.
Right. And I think that
And I don't think, the office didn't either. I think our, the People's Council's issue or concern was making sure that residential low-income residents were included or were not cast aside in terms of these programs.
so would a better way of phrasing this be recognizing that the new law contemplates, permits
Yeah.
spending on shelters and clinics?
Well, it's whether they are counted as benchmark. Or that's true. That spending, whether that spending is included in the is part of the benchmark.
It is.
Yes, it is.
So it's not removing renewables and commercial contracts. It's still maximizing low-income resident participation, numbers, and energy
Maybe
savings.
by giving priority to, or focusing on, or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though the others are allowed.
Okay.
And I think that was the general intent of Sean's comment and even LPC stuff.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
prioritizing residential.
Yeah, whatever possible.
Right. And I mean, is that something that is mechanically feasible to do?
Well,
Is there an avenue or a route for doing that?
Whatever SEU decides where to spend the money.
Okay.
I mean, if you can spend it on A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And spending it on A, B, and C all count towards the benchmark. We're saying we prefer to focus beyond spending on A.
Okay.
Right?
And theoretically, that's something in a strategic plan that we would be able to bring in on.
And you're still there.
Okay. I think those were the conceptual issues.
But we shouldn't criticize the SEU for what they did because they.
That was what the law said.
That was a
Yes.
deliberate decision.
Understood. Yeah.
Because it's probably, well, that's a whole. Whether or not you could beat that benchmark solely by residential is not possible.
Understood. Okay.
But can I ask one question before we move on?
Yes.
Chairman King, you did an analysis about, on the electric side, about the reduction in sales of electricity.
Yes.
This is, I know we're in the gas discussion now. Did you do any sort of similar analysis on the potential reduction of gas sales over
We have,
similar time?
but we have the figures, the sales figures. So it certainly could be done. We do it for electricity because of the renewable portfolio standards. We have to have the actual sales on megawatt hours. And we get the same monthly reports from Washington Gas on how much gas they deliver. We also get the reports from each of the retail suppliers. We have 22 retail suppliers, which supply about half the gas. We get reports from them. So we could put that together. We could share that information. It's the non-confidential part, the totals. And we could go back. We have been requiring that from Washington Gas for probably 100 years.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Well then, look for your inbox. Oh, yeah. If you guys could please get the green jobs part, we'll send that over to Nicole as soon as we can, and otherwise I'll revise the remainder. And any other comments, I think, please send them by email. I may be calling DOE for a couple, for help with some fillers and citations and the like.
Well, I think one of the things that I see in this process, it really does force the board members, either the new ones, to get to know about the SEU and performance, and then it certainly points the other members that have been here a while to kind of this. I think this is a very healthy process for the advisory board, and it's been. I really appreciate hearing the dialogue back and forth, and also pushing on all of us on whether EMD should do this or that or any of these questions. So thank you very much to the board.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this was the day at the beach. Every
But it takes a long time to get to the beach.
Oh my goodness, yeah, well,
A lot of traffic.
sea level rise should take care of that.
I did want to add one comment and maybe ask the board opinion on it. The section on the new benchmarks here in this report, I'm just concerned that we're focusing 4 or 5 pages on the new benchmarks and the new contract when this report is based on FY16. Board in another 2 or 3 months will be drafting a report for FY17. So I'm wondering if this section is going to be repeated in a new report that you're going to be doing, because FY17 report is where the new contract starts. So maybe just skipping this discussion on the new benchmarks with that report as just a suggestion with the board.
I think the main purpose was because a big chunk of what the board did was to participate in the new RFP and explain reasons for changing it. Is why it's to record what the board did with its time. It can be condensed. I'm completely open to suggestion. Yes, this part I did spend a lot of time on, but I have no pride of authorship. It's always a good learning experience.
Maybe when we get to the 2017 report, we can simply say, as we said in the 2016 report, the board recommended changes in benchmarks, and these were put in place, or most of them were put in place, and move on.
If the concern is, which is a fair one, that it's long, this report is long, and it would be better as an appendix, then certainly fine with that as well.
No, I think this is valuable stuff, but to me, in my opinion, when you talk about the new contract, it really kicks in from 17. So if you're writing the 17 report, it's worthwhile reflecting on the changes in the new contract and the changes in the benchmarks. I'm just not sure how much value we'll have reading it for the last year of a previous contract, which will be referencing the benchmarks.
Why don't we emphasize that this is to track what the board did, as opposed to it being a lengthy recitation of what's to come? Is that okay? I think that's a very fair point. Okay, great. They were putting this puppy to bed. Let's go back now that we have a quorum quickly on the minutes.
Can I make one last comment?
Of course.
I thought it would come up, and it didn't. No mention was made about the conclusion section, the end.
Okay.
It wasn't very long.
And
I thought there might be some discussion about that, but apparently not.
well, no, if you want to have discussion, we should have discussion. And I will tell you the origin of the conclusion section was I took it from the OPC's section. It was its last paragraph, and I moved it in under a heading called conclusion. And in a prior version, I said, I am moving this section because having not heard conclusions, that was my suggestion.
Well, have we discussed, have others seen it and discussed what they think of those words?
Affirmatively, only passively, with people having received the report, and this language has been unchanged, but nobody has talked about it largely, I think, because we haven't gotten that far. So
because you haven't gotten that far.
we hadn't really, because we spent a lot of time off and on the same topics.
The likelihood that will be looked at.
I think this is it. Like, this is the week. This is
what
it.
I thought.
Yeah. So I think.
Well, if everyone's happy with it, I will.
But if you have comment, you should go ahead and comment.
Well, I don't have it in front of me. That's
It's right
Well,
there.
I can't.
conclusion.
I'm sorry, I can't read that far. With these glasses. Yeah, it was short, which was no problem. Right? I wouldn't know that either.
No, that's.
No. Okay, let me just look. I mean, actually, it looks fine.
Okay, when I send it around again, I'll highlight, people please pay attention, because we have not discussed it, whether the board is satisfied with that as a conclusion.
Okay. Well, when I read it, it was, I was trying to make sure I could watch CNN Heroes at 8 o'clock last night, and I actually read the whole thing from beginning to end.
Wow.
And, well, of course, it took a while, but, and so I did finish it at 7:52, and that was the last part I read. No,
Thank goodness it was short.
Sure.
Thank
that
goodness.
wasn't short.
No,
Oh,
the conclusion, so that
was
you can
short.
make it in time for Heroes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It looks fine to me.
Okay.
Today.
But I will call it out to people. Pay attention to conclusion.
And one other thing, Vicki, as well, with the appendix that focuses on the comparisons regarding the Maryland Empower programs and other DC SEU programs,
yes,
specific to acquisition costs. I just want to look at that section just a little bit more as well to make certain that it is appropriately characterized, because again, we have raised some concerns and have in languages in here concerning the distinguishing features between the various programs, and it was not an apples to apples type comparison from an analysis perspective. So just wanting to look at that section a little bit more in detail to make certain that it's fine, but it is in the appendix.
And I would be very appreciative of your doing that. Yeah, and I think that was, the issue was it was in a footnote, and there was discussion about physically moving it from a footnote elsewhere or moving it into an appendix if we thought it was important, but if what's in here isn't important, but the distinguishing features that make it not an apples to apples is what we really want to emphasize. I think we should be doing so.
Oh, thank you. I'll send that to you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. So those two pieces, Green Jobs and Dr. Cooper's look at that, and then also the 3% decline verification, I think, are the outstanding, and then the rewrites I said I would do, and then we'll send it out, I hope, very, very shortly so that everyone can have their holiday week. Okay, let's just go back really quickly on the minutes. I personally did not have any comments on the November 21st minutes, and don't know if anybody else did. And are we reading silently to ourselves, or does that mean no comment?
No comment.
No comment on the content, but I wonder if it would be useful. There is a lot of text, and I wonder if it would be useful to pull out any specific follow-up requests that the board has and add that as a section towards the end to make sure that it's clear what needs to be followed up on. So board request to the SAU.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I will note also, just for the heck of it, that the October minutes that we didn't yet pass on, which you may or may not have, which we can talk about in a second, did have that section, and the November ones didn't, because that may have been more of a meeting called together to continue to slug through the board report. But I think it's a great idea. So, okay, I'm going to say, follow up on Millie's suggestion, and I don't know if this is a motion, but the board is crisply asking, please, for the minutes to conclude with a summary paragraph of what the board has requested. I will make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, newcomer Knowlton. I think that's great. Good idea.
Okay, I believe something that is missing.
Okay.
In the November comments on the, I guess, third page, under review and discussion of the draft annual report, which says Mrs. Strunk provided comments from OPC, including adding the composition of the 13-member board. I would just add in noting OPC's concern that residential low-income consumers not be overshadowed by the commercial buildings, or residents in commercial buildings.
And I think it was also in the context of the shelters and clinics, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I meant, shelters and
Okay.
clinics. But I didn't see it reflected.
Maybe.
Is it adequate on page 4, the second to last bullet, where there was that general discussion of the shelters, the second sentence? We can maybe think about what we're pointing to.
Oh, okay. That's a little different.
Yeah. I don't think it was discussed that early, but we could add it.
Right. Well, it could be added here.
Mm-hmm.
That we basically OPC's concern is making sure that the low-income residential homeowners are still a priority.
Yes, got it.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you. Is anyone still reading, or are they looking at other documents? Yeah, everyone done? Okay, let's move to, with the amendment that was offered by the Office of the People's Council. I'll move to adopt the minutes. Any second motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. They're approved. Going back for a second because Chairman Kane and the Director were not here, the minutes for October 16th that were still outstanding, they were hung up. I asked to hold up because I thought that they we're missing a piece, and I've proposed a piece, and I circulated a red line version, but since people don't have them who are on the phone, I'm suggesting hunting again on these. And just one thing I want to point out, on the big addition I made was on page 5, and then the other tone addition I talked about earlier, where I thought our intelligence was maligned. On 5, talking about the sliding benchmark for low income. We spent a lot of time on that, and I appreciate that. And we thought that that was a good policy discussion. I think what I put in the end about asking if there were any additional modifications, and there were none, is that I'm not sure that we did hit all of the modifications, and this is why I wanted to spend some time. So I think we looked at C48321, but I don't know that we talked about C48312. Of those September modifications. And it had to do with numerators and denominators and what was in and what was out. So I thought it would be worthwhile if we could still go over those. But I'm going to suggest, in the interest of time, that we discuss these minutes, closing out the October 16th minutes, and that remaining contract modification for the next meeting.
Sounds good. One thing I do want to just note to the board, and this is the best way, I've never seen minutes that are 9 pages, single space, 8-point type. Maybe it's 10, but it looks like 8. But this is minus. It's not 12. I wouldn't need my glasses.
Because red lines, right?
Oh, okay.
It says online, the electronic version.
But this is. It says 12. Okay. Yeah, I just have to say, this is. I think what's important is that the board be very clear what the minutes are to accomplish. I mean, you definitely want to use the minutes to build for the annual report to the council. You want to know specific things that you've asked for and brought up, certainly, but in particular, any board actions need to be reflected here. We will happily move forward with this, but I don't serve on a board that has, I mean, I've certainly been to court where we've gotten, the court reporter has done this, and I'm sure got that, but I don't serve on a board that has this much minutes. That said, if the board is satisfied and happy, I need to wrap it up. But this, I don't. Maybe I'm the only one. But that's just. I know it's been a bone of contention. It was very dense.
It's hard to strike the balance. And I just finished about 8 years chairing the advisory committee for the Federal Communications Commission. And the minutes are really just the agenda and the reports that were given, and then a summary of the action items at the end. But we've had in the past where I think, well, we did discuss this at that meeting, meeting 6 months ago, and this is what we talked about.
Which is more of a transcript type minutes rather than a board action minutes.
We do record them.
And the audio recording is available.
In the old days, when there was no audio and visual recording, it was a more faithful transcription and like a transcript as opposed. And now I think if the expectation is for the board to go back and watch the
public
videos,
or at least go through.
We haven't gotten the right balance.
No, it's gone the other way probably now that we have the recording. But I do think with having at the end the action items that were taken, including things like approve this, approve that, just the summary at the end. We don't do minutes of the commission because we record a lot of all our open meetings, but we do put out post a notice the next day within a few days after the meeting, a list of what was approved with a 1-sentence description of what it was, where it is, where it is. In Ada.
Just a reflection.
Yeah. It is a balance that has to be struck. And then you drop too much information, and people say, well, it's not there, it's not listed.
And we don't have
did
to do
discuss
it
that in June.
now, but there may be just an agenda item to say, what do we want specifically for the minutes, so that all the board members have that conversation. One clearly is to build through a report, so that you can just pull out of the minutes to build a report.
Well, but it isn't. If it's to go back to the video, then it's not going to be in the minutes.
I just think that conversation should happen so that everyone's clear, because that if the expectations be closer to a transcript, it's hard to do.
Because you end up in terms.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I just thought it was more that the expectation was for it to be balanced, and sometimes it comes out subjective and
I don't know
unbalanced.
What balance means.
Yeah, I think it's
Wait a minute. Let me just quickly say, it's one thing to represent what people say, and it's another to represent what the board did. Because people are going to say stuff all through the meeting, and differentiating that there's no weight necessarily that someone said anything, unless, of course, it's some type of notice that, a fraud or something like that, them saying it has some legal import, but just the fact that they said it, if that is important, then we should be more transcript based.
All right. Well, I think that to the extent that the board is making a record, for example, of a contract modification in which the board was not apprised, that it had a concern. What the board says matters in that context. The board couldn't do anything because the contract modification was done and the board agreed it wasn't going to undo anything. So I think it's important for that, and that was the part I was saying was missing, to capture what the board's conclusion was as to that modification, so they could therefore lead the board to wanting to make a recommendation subsequently, either legislatively or to the next RFP contract modification. But the board didn't do anything. So, I mean, that may not be the best example, but that does show that it isn't always going to fall into what the board did or voted on. But sure, let's make that an agenda item.
I'm just an ex officio. You guys are the board members.
No, but I mean, it's also fair to understand if this isn't a good use of people's time, then that's an issue too. Be sensitive to people's resources.
We like having you here, Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I think I did redline. People haven't seen it, so they'll see this now. And I do want to just return for a moment to that one contract modification. I don't think we did go over that I found confusing about the numerator and the denominator. And I will put that in writing because I know that this request is vague and that no one's going to understand what I'm talking about. I will put it in writing.
What was the red line one said?
I sent it around for, I don't know if it's in the Dropbox or if it's printed in her copy. I did, yeah. Yeah. Okay, into the Dropbox or into the... So I think if you could include it, please, in the Dropbox as well. I probably asked for it in hard copy on the naive expectation.
Yes, you specifically asked the hard copy. That's why we printed these out for today.
I did. So what I was going to say was because I thought that might accelerate people's ability to get through the comments,
yes.
But recognizing that it doesn't and that people weren't here, I think that we should put them in the Dropbox. So that was my request. Yeah, absolutely. And I will follow up. Okay, next. FY17 performance. Okay, so one question there. We had asked, I think, the board had requested that we see these things in advance. And we did not, so that we would be able to be slightly more intelligent than we already are in reviewing this today.
Is it PowerPoint or is it a report?
I don't know.
It's a PowerPoint presentation that the SES prepared.
Okay, just look. I will reiterate the request that for presentations where we're talking about numbers and the like, that we be able to see them in advance to digest them before the presentations.
And Madam Chair, members of the board, yes, good morning. These are a snapshot of our FY17 results that we'll go through in a minute. And I believe that the full FY17 report, is, if it hasn't been distributed to the board already, it will be distributed fairly soon.
No, we've shared it with the board already. We've sent the FY17.
So these are going to be reflective of what you've already seen in the FY17 report.
Okay.
It's been shared.
Okay.
This is a snapshot of not all of our results, but the key results for the things that we've been working on over the last 12 or so months. Before we get to the results, we have a new CEO at BEIC. He wants us to maintain a strong customer focus. So I will start all of these presentations with a story about what we're doing with a customer. That's one of the changes that you'll see in the way that we're reporting out these things. And finally, we will end this with showing you some of the media we've received over the last few months and an invitation to a very exciting event that we will be having next month. Go to the first slide. We are completing phase 2 of a comprehensive look at the lighting, HVAC systems, and the like over at the National Zoo. This is a picture of the panda cage you can see. I don't know if this is a mayor, which panda it is. In particular there, with some new LED lighting that has been put in the panda cages. Not just the panda cages, all over the zoo. The lighting expert in our office worked extensively with the people up at the National Zoo to help change out all of the lighting, decreasing energy consumption dramatically at the zoo, increasing comfort for the animals because you're taking out that old hot lighting. It's easier for the zookeepers to control the temperature within the cages, and so they're very, very happy about this project. This is, as I said, phase 2 of a 3-phase project. We'll probably complete the 3rd phase later on in this fiscal year 18, and we'll get back to you.
Is the panda the customer?
Yeah.
As we know, the zoo animals are not ratepayers.
Yes.
The zoo is, in fact, a large customer within the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
And so this is just some lighting that we did at this particular. This is a job we inspected probably about 2 weeks ago. After this, about 2 weeks ago.
Ted, in terms of in light of our previous discussion about positive publicity and public perception of what, is there going to be any signage or anything else that the Smithsonian or the Friends of the National Zoo are doing this, or kind of putting up saying, gee, these lights were changed and it was the DCSCU with the ratepayer, any of that up? Or did they put it in so people, so look, there are new lights here.
Right. I don't think so yet. Clearly, this is something that we can capture in our newsletter that we send out to stakeholders. But we can talk to the National Zoo.
Talk to the zoo about it. They should want to brag about it too, being more energy efficient.
And that's in keeping what you said earlier about making sure people understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Can you also give us a sense of, like, in the whole slate of what the SEU did in 2017, like, what did this cost, or how did it happen, and how does it contribute to a benchmark?
Sure. Would you allow me to give you that in writing later on this week so I can give you a breakdown of the exact energy savings?
Sure, I'm just curious. I mean, I think that's part of the story.
This wasn't a huge project by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a good size, only a long-term project. One of many that we're doing, here in the city. But
Right, and my
It is
question
kind of
wasn't to be
exciting,
critical.
like a
It was,
visual.
this is
Yeah.
this is your customer story, so I'm just trying to
Right.
understand the story and how
Right.
it fits in with.
Right.
Yeah.
This would do something that would be part of our commercial custom program, lighting program. So, yeah, but we can clearly give you a full rundown of energy savings, all of the types of measures that either have been or will be installed. As I said, this is a 3-phase project. This is only the end of phase 2.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. It's visible. It's really important.
So we'll start the next slide with kind of a look back over the last 5 years, 4 of them. 5 years of verified savings, starting with FY12. FY17 savings that will start showing you on a more detailed level in a minute, of course, are not verified yet. But this shows you the progression, the growth, the improvement in outcomes every year that we've been here. The green bar on the left represents electric savings, the blue bar on the right represents natural gas. FY17 at the far end, the last year that we completed, of course. But it shows a nice, we think, kind of upward trajectory of where we're going and how we've been doing over the last 6 years.
I'm just curious, what would be the cause of the, I would think that there would be some sort of low hanging fruit early on. What would be the cause of the increase in more hours? Or is this cumulative?
This is not cumulative.
Okay.
This is each year. This is presented year by year.
Is it technology shifts or is there?
No, not really. It's getting better at what we do, getting better at customer acquisition, improving yields, paying less for projects, year by year. Again, getting better known in the community, pick up clearly in efficient product sales, lighting in particular at the retail level.
I think what you'll also see is from 12 to 16 annual base contract, so we had to grab savings in permanent. Whereas 17, that would establish longer term projects as well as initiatives, and so that's where we think the results are going to come.
Next question. Sean. The gas.
That's technology. That's the trucks. Yes. Let's dive into the minimum benchmark for electric savings. Right here demonstrated by the red line, the maximum by the green line. And so as you can see, for the first time, we've exceeded the maximum for the benchmark for electric savings. We've always been, a bit under that over the years. Exceeded the benchmark. Again, unverified results for last year. Look at gas next. The minimum benchmark again represented in the red, maximum represented in the green up there. That's about 16 or so % above the maximum benchmark for that particular fuel source. Very strong.
So those were the things, the benchmarks for the maxima were not exceeded in 2016, were not hit. So you're saying in 2017, you hit them,
yes.
You exceeded.
Yes.
Yeah, electric.
So with the comment about the 5-year contract, are the cumulative savings from these longer term contracts counted all towards 2017? Or are they?
No. So this is the first year of the 5-year contract. So if we're looking at this next year, your minimum will be much higher than this, probably your maximum will be much higher than this. See where the energy savings that are represented.
So your answer is that it will be cumulative.
That it'll be cumulative. We'll start seeing these
previously it's not been cumulative.
Yeah, in the prior years, yeah, I know Ms. Knowlton, you haven't been here, but you would have seen just an annual.
Yeah, there's a chart in the contract that shows this. That shows the on page 41, for example, shows the exact
Okay,
targets.
I do. Thank you.
Where we would look at green jobs.
So I'm sorry, just to follow up, does that mean that the benchmark is lower for an annual? Like, how does the benchmark compare to last year, the quantitative or the numeric number?
I mean, these are all of the benchmarks in the new contract. So these are not compared to FY16.
Right, but how does a 1 year minimum maximum for the first year of the new contract compare to 2016?
Probably the mins and maxes in the 17 contract are a little bit lower than in 16. They get much higher, particularly starting to ramp up much higher in the year 3.
And are the benchmarks cumulative?
Most of the benchmarks are cumulative. The electric and gas benchmarks are cumulative. There is a renewables benchmark that's cumulative. The low income benchmark is an annual benchmark. Green jobs benchmark is an annual benchmark. Those are not cumulative. You'll see the green jobs benchmark next.
So I think one thing that's important to point out in this discussion is that for the first couple of years, the FY17 energy savings benchmarks were slightly lower, just because DOE didn't know who they were going to select as a contractor, so they wanted to give them the time to ramp up on performance. But then in year 3, 4, and 5, it catches up, so that it's supposed to be reflective of a 5% reduction over 5 years. So when you look at the out years, you'll see that these maximums and minimums are almost double.
Mm-hmm. And was an issue also, though, that you're trying to invest in the projects that will show savings later? That's the point of having a multi-year contract.
Yes. That's right. Now, the green jobs benchmark, just on a comparative basis, has been the same over the last 6 years. So if you've seen this benchmark before, it's always been 88 FTEs. Last year, I think we were right at about that 88 number, slightly over. This year, we were about 84. FY17 was about 84. Clearly exceeding the minimum, not quite up to the max on this particular benchmark.
So last year that was exceeded, right? Green jobs. And so what do you think is going on?
On this one, probably two things. Fewer staff in the office, fewer direct install jobs that are done by contractors, so the employees, there were less hours reported by employees of these contractors. It's a combination of those two things.
So we had high turnover in 16, where we lost a lot of people. And so as we were building back up our internal workforce, we didn't have people in there for the full year to log green job hours. And also, and I think as we'll talk about in 17, we went away from, in order to get higher savings, we went away from a lot more contractor direct install green job hours, because they don't yield the same benchmarks in energy savings.
So the turnover in the SCU was relevant to hitting the benchmark because that's where green jobs are in the SCU?
That's where
it is one of the categories of green jobs, yes. So we would look at all of the employees of the SCU who are district residents as green jobs. I'm one green job. Marcus. We would look at the hours that are worked by the contractors and their employees, and those count towards the green jobs as well. And then you take a look at, on the other hand, the amount of money spent in incentives. We've talked about that amount of money spent in incentives divided by 200,000. You get a resulting number of green jobs from that as well. but particularly for this one, coming out of FY16, I think as Margaret said, in the year in which this contract was rebid, there was a lot of uncertainty on staff as to whether or not we would be here. And I would say probably over 12 staff members left the organization. We did not immediately backfill those positions. We felt it would have been unfair to people not knowing whether or not we were going to be around to hire a bunch of people and say, oh, by the way, our contract just got terminated, so you're out the job, even though you agreed to come here 2 months ago. So a lot of those jobs remained unfilled for a good bit of time. Next one is low-income spending. As you know, in prior contracts, the low-income spend has been 30% of the value of the contract. In the new contract, it's 20% of the value of the contract. And I'll show you, of course, there's a second part to this low-income benchmark as well, which is the savings that have to be attained out of the low-income spend. But we were just in excess of the 20% on the spending side for this particular benchmark. So that's, hitting the max there. On the savings side, which Lance will show you here, we were above the minimum, not quite up, not nearly up to the maximum. This is an area where we're going to have to work a lot harder in FY18 and in the ensuing years, making sure we increase our yields in the low-income space. And I think that this is a discussion that, having heard a lot of what Ms. Sistrunk and others have said around here about making sure that we are serving certain parts of the low-income customer segment, I think this is going to be an important discussion moving forward about how we try to serve certain customers within the low-income segment, and how we try to make sure that we're trying to get about 10% of our overall savings out of this low-income spend. So there's a spending and a savings component to this that has to be achieved. So this is going to be a good discussion.
So may I ask, this contract modification that we spent a lot of time on, which was talking about the inherent disconnect or the tension between incentivizing and spending and energy reduction and low-income savings being a fixed point and having to get it done in a year was acting as a disincentive. It looks like it didn't work out, the contract modification. The point of making the contract modification was so as to not to, I guess it was apples and oranges. It was so as not to disincentivize future spending on commercial projects.
I would look at it partially, yes, that way, Madam Chair. I would look at it additionally as your low-income spend effectively could be a floating target. As we're looking at projects that we can bring in the last month or two of the fiscal year, if there's a really good commercial high-income project that we could close, we would also have to close in under the way the old benchmark was structured, a whole lot of low-income work that may not have been, available to us. We might not have had the money. We may not have had the projects available. And so you essentially had a floating target that you're trying to get at.
Right.
That was the difficulty.
So that we switched. So it was an apples and oranges. So I'm sorry. So what do you attribute this performance to?
This is getting better yields in the low-income space than we have achieved in the past, but not high enough to quite hit the maximum as the benchmark has been set at a very aggressive level. This is a very difficult benchmark to hit both spending and.
So can I double back on it? So I think that actually the contract amendment did fix, I think, the challenge that we were facing around moving target. This way we have a set range of between 5 and 10%. I think what this performance represents here is that we paid, a lot of projects we paid 100% for low-income work. This year we're focusing on, as Ted said, to improve our yields by getting more customer contribution and looking for financing options so that we can do more measures. A lot of this, what you'll see here, is low-income lighting versus like boilers. And some of that has to do with the fact that when you convert megawatt hours to MMBTUs and therms to MMBTUs, you get a more favorable conversion if you do electric savings there. And so what we're balancing right now is, we could have gone for 10% savings, but we would have probably not been able to do as many boilers, which need for buildings or for folks' homes. And so that's kind of the ongoing discussion that we're having with DOE around savings and spend, and also that we've got a tenth less of our budget than we spent in the past.
I could just add one thing, just so everyone understands, where did this sort of 5%, 10% come from? LBNL, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, did a study of low-income spends around the country and found, on average, low-income programs, because of things like 100% costs, were on average costing 4 times as much per unit of energy savings as commercial and institutional projects. So to spend 20% of their budget and to get 5% of their savings would be exactly in line with sort of what you would expect based on the national. By asking for 10%, we're saying we think the SCU can do better, and what Ted's saying is that you're seeking to try to figure out how to do that. No.
Can I follow up on your question about the electric versus gas? Did I understand what you said, that if you took a building, let's say here, which was heated with electricity and you switched it to a gas boiler? No, that's what you. I thought you were saying you got a bigger kind of reduction in energy.
Yes.
Because the electricity is less efficient than if you took a building that already had gas and you put in a more efficient, more modern boiler. You would still save, but gas to start with.
Right. So we're not.
Is that what you were saying?
No. That situation, we're not talking about necessarily a fuel switch. We're talking about replacing low-income lighting is better for that benchmark than boilers, because it's a costlier.
Because they're more expensive.
Yeah, more expensive, and also your conversion from therm sim MBTU is not as favorable as if you do an electric project. I think there's a 3.1 conversion factor that gives you more. Electric savings are better. Yeah.
And who determines those conversion factors?
These are industry standards.
Yes.
Yep. And how would it be more efficient?
Right.
Okay, good. Go to. Yes.
So we can go to the next one, which is the renewable energy generating capacity installed. As you will recall, in FY16, we were focusing on low-income single-family homes. FY17, we worked on large commercial installations. The maximum goal for this was about a megawatt. We did a little bit over twice that amount, working on large facilities here in the district. Obviously, strong showing here on the renewable side. No, we did not use any REDF, Renewable Energy Development Fund money. In 17, we did a lot of that in 16. This is all with the SETF.
Ted, can you just name 3 or 4 of these companies that you did this for?
Mainly federal facilities with the Capital Solar Challenge, the Natural History Museum, American Indian Museum, were a couple of large ones, Office of Personnel Management, large federal facilities.
Okay.
Spending with certified business enterprises, as you know, there's no maximum on this, but there is a minimum threshold that we have to hit every year. So here was around $2.2 million. We did close to $3.5 million, so we well exceeded our certified business enterprise spend. That one, there's no maximum, on this particular benchmark, but we did well over the minimum. Customer service, now you're going to see a big difference here. What we did in FY16 versus 17. This is part of the shift in the paradigm of the old contract and the new, the types of customers we're serving. We've had this discussion with the board before. before about going out and finding large commercial projects in order to hit these more aggressive goals. We determined, we took out our Energy Star with Performance, Home Performance with Energy Star program, which was a residential program. We eliminated that, shifted funding around so that we could do more commercial projects. So you're going to see a large differentiation in FY16 and 17 in the number of customers served. Finally, this is not finally, but this is a chart that you've seen before that kind of shows how we delivered our programs over the first 5 or so years of the contract, how we're aiming to change those programs for delivery, quite frankly, over the beginning of 17 and then on through the end of 2021. Moving away from some of the things like direct install and over here with the certified business enterprises, we still have to do some of that, but moving towards new strategies with enhanced technical assistance from our engineers, a lot of data analytics, pay for performance, which I think Patty has come in and talked to the board about some of the new strategies that we're having, funding and financing, and clearly working with the benchmarking piece, Marshall, that you guys are doing. Codes and standards will be a big piece in this as well, but a new type of delivery of programs from the organization that, again, we've talked about in the past, and if the board would want a greater and more detailed breakdown of this maybe in January or February, whenever we meet again, so that we can refresh everyone's memories about where we want to go, where we believe we need to go. The workforce development program being consistent, throughout the last 5 years, and as we see things moving forward, we clearly want to maintain a strong emphasis on that work. But in the leveraging piece, I think is, if it's not in here, you see DC PACE and the Green Bank, and we know that there needs to be a lot of collaboration between us, PACE, the Green Bank, as the Green Bank has stood up. We try to work collaboratively together to stretch all of our dollars even further in this space. Some recent news that's been out there, some of the good news that we're very, very proud of. We had Energy Efficiency Day back in November, I believe, and there were some op-eds that were written and published. That's a picture of me on Channel 9 talking about some of our efficient products for residential customers. Channel 9 hosted us on Energy Efficiency Day and put us on as part of the morning news segment that they had. This particular, we're working a lot with restaurants. You'll see DC Eater put out a piece, I think this was last week, about some of our work with restaurants, which are very energy intensive organizations. Howard University, we've been continuing to do a lot of work there, and significant energy savings have been realized over at Howard. So a number of really different sorts of media outlets have been covering us. There was a great press release that was sent out jointly by the mayor about the homeless shelter, the project that we completed there recently. Emory Shelter that we completed recently. So lots of good press going out there. I know it's noon. All right. I'll wrap up with one last slide. Very last one. Oh, I'm sorry. The State Department sent over a Chinese delegation about 2 weeks ago, and so we were very happy to entertain them. And then finally, in January, because part of the contract says that they really want us to do a lot of innovation, so we're having an innovation forum in January. We invite all of you to that forum. It will be on January 24th. You will get a personal invitation. Don't worry about thinking this is your invitation, but wanted to give you advance notice of it. PEPCO has graciously agreed to sponsor this with us and be a speaker at the forum as well, and we are bringing in 3 different technologies, 2 of them from Europe, and one is an American company, to talk about some great innovative things that are being done and that we hope to deploy in the District of Columbia over the next 2 years or so. So with that, members of the board, that concludes our presentation for today. And I know it's noon. I'm sorry to have taken too much time if I did, but happy to answer any additional questions you guys may have.
All right, thank you.
No questions? Everybody's digesting? No questions? Yeah. Okay, in terms of the use of this report, and Ted, congratulations. It's a very good report. Is there anything additionally that the board would like in reviewing this report, since it's the first time we've seen it? Okay.
Again, you have received copies of our full FY17 report, which includes all of the benchmarks, the performance benchmarks and the tracking benchmarks as well. And that is a pretty, substantial, pretty long report. But if there are some questions of it that arise, we're happy to answer them. You can send us an email, or clearly we'll probably be meeting next month. Happy to answer.
And Dr. Lonk or Dr. Barnes, anything that you want to say about this? I guess we have an EMB audit of the results, right? That happens next. Anything else that you guys want to add about the report for the board?
No, I thought that the performance in FY17 was pretty outstanding. Personally, I was impressed with the results, and hopefully the EMB contracted higher to substantiate the numbers that are presented here today.
Yeah, I would agree. FY17 was an interesting year. There was a lot happening with the transition. So for the SU to walk throughout and such results, that was good to see.
Marshall?
Yeah, I just wanted to add here, just for people's knowledge, as we know, we have been working to finalize the Clean Energy DC plan. One of the feedback we got from a number of stakeholders, including the board, was that it didn't seem like there were enough energy efficiency savings being modeled and expected in that plan. And in conversations with the consultants working on that, we've been able to use the DCSU's results and increase sort of confidence in that, and we've been able to build more savings attributed to the SCU in our years into that document. So that'll be reflected. That's not going to be reflected. I wanted to say that I think that the strong performance in this year was definitely helpful.
Okay, Ben?
I just want to say that I'm very happy to see what the evolution has been between SCU, the board, and you, I've never called you Mr. Director this time. And I think it's really good. And very serious people, we're greatly attentive to these things. I do think that, and I didn't have anything to do with it, work put out by, that's got to be put out by the advisor. Tremendous amount of thought and work went into it. So I think it's kind of a real positive tone between us three different organizations at this point.
Hasn't always been that way, has it?
No, I didn't want. Oh, I didn't want to. You got me there, Tommy. I mean, Mr. Director.
All right, Mr. Board Member. All right, anybody else? Okay. Ted, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On behalf of Vicki, I'll bring the meeting to a close. All right.
Perfect time. Have a 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Have a festive holiday season.
This is my first picture.
Marianne, I won't see you before Christmas, hopefully.
You always